Millionaire disowns his son for marrying a beggar, but 2 months later, everyone was stunned by what happened. Nathan Thompson adjusted his Italian silk tie in front of the mirror of his penthouse in Chicago. His fingers trembled slightly as he prepared for the meeting that would change his life. After months of hiding his relationship with Lily Anderson, a young woman he had met during a trip to Asheville, in the countryside of Chicago, he had finally mustered the courage to tell the truth to his father, the powerful businessman William Thompson. The reflection in the mirror showed a 28-year-old man, heir to a business empire, but his eyes revealed the anxiety of someone about to defy all the expectations placed on his shoulders. On the coffee table in the living room rested the only photo he had with Lily, a simple snapshot taken at a craft fair where she sold paper flowers to help with household expenses. "Are you sure about this?" The question from his mother, Elizabeth, echoed through the room as she entered. Her kind eyes showed concern but also a glimmer of understanding that Nathan had never noticed before. "Mom, I've never been more certain of anything in my life," he replied, tucking the photo into the inner pocket of his jacket. "Lily is different from anyone I've ever met. She makes me see the world in a way I never thought possible." Elizabeth stepped closer, adjusting the tie her son had just fixed. "Your father, he has very specific expectations for you, my son, especially now with the business expansion in Asia." Nathan smiled, holding his mother's hands tenderly. "That's exactly what I want to talk to him about. I can't keep pretending to be someone I'm not. Lily has shown me that there's happiness in simplicity, that a person's worth isn't measured by their bank account." The sound of the doorbell interrupted the conversation. William Thompson had arrived for dinner. Nathan took a deep breath, preparing for the confrontation ahead. His father entered the apartment with his usual imposing presence, the impeccable suit, and the gold watch that cost more than many cars. "Son, I just came from a meeting with the Japanese. The project for the new branch in Tokyo is practically finalized. We will need you there for at least 2 years to oversee everything," announced William, not even greeting his wife. Nathan felt his stomach churn. It was now or never. "Dad, we need to talk." "I'm not going to Tokyo." Silence filled the room. William stopped fiddling with his phone and stared at his son with disbelief. "What do you mean you're not going? Do you have any idea what you're saying?" "I do, Dad. And there's more." Nathan pulled the photo from his pocket and placed it on the coffee table. "I've met someone who has completely changed my life." William picked up the photo, examining it with disdain. "Who is this? This girl? It's Lily. She's an artisan in Asheville. She works with paper flowers and helps her father in a ceramic studio. We're getting married." William's face turned into a mask of contained fury. "Is this some kind of joke? You're going to throw your life away for a paper flower seller?" "Lily is so much more than that, Dad. She's taught me the value of honest work, of simplicity." "Simplicity?" William threw the photo back on the table. "You were educated at the best schools in the world, have a bright future ahead of you, and you want to trade all that for a mediocre life in the countryside?" Elizabeth tried to intervene. "William, please." "Stay out of this, Elizabeth." William raised his voice, making his wife step back. Turning to Nathan, he continued, "You have 2 choices. Either forget this madness and take on your responsibilities at the company, or you can forget you have a father." Nathan felt his heart tighten, but his voice came out firm. "Then I guess I don't have a father anymore." "You're throwing away a lifetime of work, the entire empire I built." "No, Dad. I'm choosing to build my own story. With Lily, I've learned that wealth isn't just measured by numbers in a bank account." William walked to the door, pausing before leaving. "From today on, you're no longer my son. You're disinherited. I don't want you in the company. I don't want you in the family. Go live your simple life with your craftswoman." The door slammed shut, leaving a heavy silence in the apartment. Elizabeth hugged her son, who remained standing, trembling but resolute. "I'll pack my things," said Nathan, kissing his mother's forehead. "Lily is waiting for me in Asheville. That's my place now." As he packed some clothes and personal items into a suitcase, Nathan looked out the window of his penthouse one last time. The lights of Chicago shone as always, but now they seemed different. His heart felt light, despite the pain of the confrontation. In a few hours he would be with Lily Anderson, starting a new life far from the luxury and impositions of his father. Chapter 2. Nathan Thompson's arrival in Asheville happened at dawn. The bus dropped him off at the simple bus station in town, where Lily was waiting with a shy smile and her brown hair tousled by the morning breeze. She wore a simple floral dress and carried one of her paper flowers, this time a vibrant yellow sunflower. "You really came?" she whispered as they embraced, as if she still couldn't believe it was real. "I promised I would," Nathan replied, breathing in the soft scent of jasmine she always wore. "And here I am, ready to start our life together." Lily picked up one of Nathan's bags, insisting on helping despite his protests. They walked together along the cobblestone streets of the historic town as the sun rose behind the mountains surrounding Asheville. The colonial houses, with their colorful windows and flower-filled balconies, were a stark contrast to the skyscrapers Nathan had left behind. "Dad prepared the back room for you," Lily explained as they climbed a hill. "He said it wouldn't be appropriate for us to sleep together before the wedding." Nathan smiled, admiring the simplicity of local traditions. "Your father is right. We'll do everything the right way, no rush." Lily's father's pottery studio was in an old house with thick adobe walls and a garden full of flowers and herbs. On the porch, Joseph, a man with calloused hands and a sun-weathered face, waited for them with a serious expression. "So you're the young man who wants to marry my daughter," he said, extending his hand to Nathan. "Lily told me about your decision to leave everything behind. Are you sure you're ready for a simple life?" Nathan shook his future father-in-law's hand, feeling the strength of honest labor in his calluses. "Yes, sir. I'm willing to learn, work hard, and build a life by your daughter's side." Joseph nodded slowly. "Well, then, we'd better get started. Coffee's on the table, and afterward you can help me in the studio. I need to see what these big city hands are capable of." The breakfast was simple but plentiful. Homemade bread, fresh butter, strong coffee, and cornmeal cake. Nathan watched Lily helping her mother, Mrs. Clare, set the table, moving with a natural grace around the rustic kitchen. The atmosphere was warm, filled with a familial intimacy he had never experienced in his home in Chicago. "So, my son," Mrs. Clare began, pouring more coffee, "Lily said you want to learn the craft of pottery." "Yes, Mum. I want to learn everything I can. I know it won't be easy, but I'm willing to start from scratch." Mr. Joseph observed his future son-in-law's responses closely. "Pottery isn't just a job, young man. It's an art that requires patience, dedication, and humility. It's not something you learn overnight." "I understand, sir. And that's exactly what draws me to it. For the first time in my life, I want to create something with my own hands, not just manage numbers on a spreadsheet." After breakfast, Nathan followed Mr. Joseph to the workshop at the back of the house. The space was spacious, with large windows that let in natural light. Several potter's wheels were arranged around the room, along with shelves filled with pieces in various stages of production. The smell of clay and the gentle sounds of the small town created a peaceful atmosphere Nathan had never experienced before. "First lesson," Mr. Joseph said, sitting at one of the potter's wheels. "Watch how it's done. Pottery is like life. It requires balance, the right amount of strength, and above all, love for what you do." Nathan watched, fascinated, as the artisan's skilled hands transformed a block of clay into a delicate vase. Lily appeared at the workshop door, carrying a tray of fresh water, and smiled as she saw her fiancé so engrossed in her father's demonstration. "Now it's your turn," Mr. Joseph said, standing up from the wheel. "Show me what you can do." With his sleeves rolled up and his hands trembling, Nathan sat down in front of the potter's wheel. The clay was cold and damp under his fingers, so different from the keyboards and papers he was used to handling. His first contact with the material was clumsy, making Lily stifle a laugh. "Don't rush," Mr. Joseph advised. "Feel the clay, let it guide you. Rome wasn't built in a day, and a good potter isn't made in a morning." Chapter 3. The first months in Asheville brought challenges Nathan had never imagined facing. His hands, once accustomed only to the soft touch of fine fabrics and computer keyboards, were now calloused and often stained with clay. The work in the studio was arduous, demanding a physical and mental dedication he had never experienced in his previous life. Lily watched her fiancé's efforts with admiration. Every morning she found him already in the studio, practicing even before sunrise. The first pieces he produced were uneven and disproportionate, but his persistence was remarkable. In her free time, she continued her work with paper flowers, now selling not only at the local market, but also to some craft stores in the area. "You're making good progress," Mr. Joseph commented one afternoon as he examined a vase Nathan had just finished. "You still have a lot to improve, but I can already see soul in your pieces." The compliment, though restrained, made Nathan smile. It was more than his own father had ever given him, even when closing million-dollar deals. "Thank you, Mr. Joseph. You're an excellent teacher." "You know, son," Mr. Joseph began, sitting on a worn wooden bench, "when I started in this life, I also faced many challenges. People didn't understand my choices." Nathan stopped his work, intrigued. It was the first time his father-in-law had spoken about his past. Lily, who was painting flowers on some nearby vases, also came closer to listen. "I come from a traditional family in San Diego, Mr. Joseph continued, his eyes fixed on a distant point, as if he could see the past materialize before him. "My father owned an import company at the harbor. They wanted me to follow the same path, to become a businessman." "And what happened?" asked Nathan, recognizing parallels with his own story. "I met Claire on a trip to Asheville. She was the daughter of a local potter, living a simple life, but her eyes had a light I had never seen before." Joseph smiled, looking affectionately at his daughter. "Lily has the same eyes as her mother." Lily hugged her father, surprised by the revelation. "Dad, you never told me that story." "Some stories need the right moment to be told, my dear," Joseph continued. "When I told my family I was going to leave everything to marry Claire and learn her father's craft, it was a scandal. My father disowned me on the spot, said I was crazy." Nathan felt a tightness in his chest, his own father's words echoing in his memory. "And you never regretted it?" "Not for a second," Joseph replied firmly. "Money comes and goes, son, but the peace of doing what you love, of waking up every day next to the one you love, that is priceless." The silence that followed was interrupted by the sound of footsteps at the entrance to the workshop. Mrs. Claire appeared, carrying a tray with coffee and homemade cookies. Her eyes met her husband's and a knowing smile passed between them. "Telling old stories, Joseph?" she asked, placing the tray on a clean work table. "Just showing our future son-in-law that sometimes we need to lose something to gain everything," he replied, standing up to help his wife with the tray. Nathan watched the couple with new eyes. Now he understood better the force that kept them together, the wisdom behind Mr. Joseph's advice, the understanding look of Mrs. Claire. They had walked the same path that he and Lily were just beginning to tread. "And your parents?" Nathan asked Mr. Joseph. "Did they eventually accept your choice?" "With time," he replied, serving the coffee. "When our Lily was born, my father came to meet his granddaughter. Seeing his family happy and prosperous, even in a way different from what he had planned, made him understand that there are many paths to happiness." Lily squeezed Nathan's hand under the table. They shared a hopeful glance. Perhaps one day, William Thompson would also understand that a father's true legacy isn't measured in figures, but in the love and courage of his children to follow their own paths. Chapter 4. Nathan and Lily's wedding was celebrated on a Saturday afternoon in the small garden of Mr. Joseph and Mrs. Claire's home. The simple ceremony was attended only by a few close friends and Lily's family. Elizabeth, Nathan's mother, couldn't attend, sending only a discreet note with wishes of happiness and an apology for her absence. The paper flowers made by Lily decorated the entire space, mixed with natural flowers from the garden. Nathan wore a simple yet elegant suit, while Lily shone in a white dress sewn by Mrs. Claire, with small handmade paper flowers sewn onto the hem. After the ceremony, during the small celebration, Mr. Joseph called the couple for a private conversation in his workshop. In the center of the room was a beautiful vase, a unique piece the potter cherished dearly. "This vase," he began, "was the first piece I managed to perfect after months of failed attempts. Claire's father taught me that pottery, like life, requires patience and dedication. Today it is yours." Lily hugged her father with tears in her eyes, while Nathan admired the piece with reverence. The vase had perfect lines and a finish he was still far from being able to replicate. Married life brought a new routine to the couple. Living in a small rented house near the workshop, they divided their time between pottery work and personal projects. Lily continued with her paper flowers, but now she also learned to paint the pieces produced in the workshop, developing unique patterns that were starting to catch the attention of customers. On a particularly hectic morning, Nathan was working on an important order, a set of vases for a famous restaurant in Chicago. It was his first big opportunity to prove his worth as a ceramicist. "Be careful with the pressure on the edges," warned Joseph, watching his son-in-law work. "If you apply too much force there—" Before he could finish the sentence, the piece warped in Nathan's hands. It was the third vase he had ruined that morning. Frustration was evident on his face. "I can't do it," he said, running his hands through his hair, smudging it with clay. "This order is so important, and all I'm doing is wasting materials." Lily, who was painting some pieces on the other side of the studio, approached her husband. "Remember what Dad always says? Haste is the enemy of perfection. But the deadline is approaching, and these are large, complex pieces. If I don't deliver, we could lose the client and life goes on," Joseph finished. "You're thinking like a businessman, Nathan. You need to think like a craftsman. Each piece has its own time, its own story." Nathan took a deep breath, remembering the days when a failed deal meant millions in losses. Now his concerns were different, but the pressure he felt was no less. "Come with me," Lily called, taking her husband's hand. She led him to a corner of the studio where she kept her painting supplies. "While you take a break, I want to show you something I've been working on." She picked up a finished vase and began to paint. Her strokes were delicate, precise, creating floral patterns that seemed to come alive on the surface of the ceramic. Nathan watched, fascinated as she worked. "Each flower I paint is unique," she explained. "Just like every vase you make. We can't rush art, my love." The rest of the afternoon passed more peacefully. Nathan returned to work with renewed energy, managing to finish 2 vases to a satisfactory quality. Meanwhile, Lily continued with her paintings, occasionally exchanging knowing smiles with her husband. At the end of the day, as they were putting away their tools, a luxurious car stopped in front of the studio. Nathan immediately recognized the driver. It was George, his father's personal security guard. "Mr. William asked me to deliver this," said George, handing over an envelope. Nathan took the envelope with apprehension, but didn't open it. "Tell my father I'm doing well in case he asks." After the car drove off, Lily hugged her husband. "Aren't you going to open it?" "Tomorrow," he replied, slipping the envelope into his pocket. "Today I just want to enjoy our peace, without any interference from the past." That evening, as they dined on the small balcony of their home, Nathan realized that true wealth was right there. In Lily's smile, the scent of earth and clay on his hands, the satisfaction of creating something with love and dedication. The envelope in his pocket could wait. His happiness couldn't be measured by any piece of paper. Chapter 5. The envelope remained untouched on the living room table for 2 full days. Nathan looked at it every morning before heading to the studio, feeling the weight of that correspondence in his thoughts. On the 3rd morning, Lily sat beside him during breakfast. "We need to open it," she said softly, placing her hand over his. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together." Nathan nodded, carefully picking up the envelope. Inside was a newspaper clipping and a handwritten note from his mother. The clipping featured an article about the expansion of the Thompson family business in Asia, with a photo of William alongside Japanese businessmen. However, what caught Nathan's attention was the tired expression on his father's face in the photo, something he had never noticed before. Elizabeth Thompson's note was brief. "Your father would never admit it, but he misses you. The company isn't the same without you. He's been staying up at night, worried about the new contracts. Yesterday I found him looking at your old photos in the office. Son, I'm not asking you to come back. I just want you to know that you are still loved, even if your father can't show it." "Your mother seems to be suffering," Lily Anderson commented after reading the note. "Yes, but she's always been like that. Torn between her love for her son and her fear of going against my father." Nathan Thompson tucked the note back into the envelope. "Come on, we have work to do at the studio." On their way to work, they were surprised by an unusual commotion in the central square. A group of people had gathered in front of the old cultural center of the city. Banners announced a regional art fair that would take place at the end of the month. "This is our chance," exclaimed Lily, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "We can exhibit your pieces and my paintings together." "I don't know, love. I still don't feel ready to showcase my work." "Nonsense," a familiar voice sounded behind them. It was Carmen Garcia, one of the most respected artists in the region. "I was at the studio last week and saw your latest pieces, Nathan. You have talent." Carmen was an elegant woman, known for her sharp eye for new talent. For years, she had been organizing exhibitions that introduced artists from the Hudson Valley to the world. "Actually," she continued, "I came looking for you. I want you both to participate in the fair as guest artists. Your pieces paired with Lily's paintings are truly unique. We have important buyers confirmed, including some collectors from Chicago," Carmen said. Nathan's heart raced. It was an incredible opportunity, but also intimidating. Lily squeezed his hand, conveying confidence. "We need to consult my father," Lily said. "Some of the techniques we use were developed by him." Of course, Carmen replied. "In fact, I've already spoken to Joseph. He's the one who suggested I reach out to you." In the studio, Mr. Joseph was already working on some pieces when they arrived. His smile revealed that he already knew about the conversation they were about to have. "So Carmen found you," he remarked, wiping his hands on his apron. "It was about time you two spread your wings." "Dad, are you sure? I mean, we still have so much to learn." "Lily, my dear, art isn't about perfection, it's about truth, and your work has truth. Nathan may not have the most refined technique yet, but his pieces have soul, and your paintings, my dear, breathe new life into ceramics." Nathan sat at his potter's wheel, deep in thought. "But what if we're not ready? What if we fail? What if you soar higher than you ever imagined?" Mr. Joseph countered. "Sometimes we need a push to discover what we're truly capable of." The following weeks were filled with intense work. The couple developed a special collection for the fair, combining the shapes created by Nathan with the delicate patterns painted by Lily. Each piece told a story, representing a moment of their lives together. One evening, as they were putting the finishing touches on the last details, Lily found Nathan admiring the vase they had received as a wedding gift. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, hugging him from behind. "About how life takes unexpected turns," he replied, gently touching the surface of the vase. "A year ago I was in a meeting room, worried about numbers and spreadsheets. Now I'm here creating something with my own hands, next to the person I love." Lily smiled, picking up her brushes. "And you don't regret it?" "Not for a second," he answered, pulling her in for a kiss. "Every day here is worth more than all the years I spent in that empty life." Chapter 6. The morning of the fair dawned with a typical Asheville mist, enveloping the town in an ethereal embrace. Nathan and Lily arrived early at the cultural center to set up their space. The pieces were carefully arranged, each individually lit to highlight the details of the paintings. "It looks beautiful," commented Mrs. Clare, who had come to help with the final preparations. "You've both grown so much in such a short time." The event started at 10, and soon the space was filled with visitors, collectors, and curious onlookers. The couple's booth stood out for the harmony between the ceramic shapes and the delicate paintings. Several buyers showed interest, taking notes and photographing the pieces. In the middle of the afternoon, an elegant woman stopped in front of a set of vases painted with wildflowers. Her critical gaze studied every detail with professional attention. "Your work is exceptional," she said, introducing herself as Sophia Williams, owner of a famous art gallery in Chicago. "Especially the integration between form and painting. I'd like to propose an exclusive exhibition at my gallery." Lily's heart raced. An exhibition in Chicago could open unimaginable doors for your collaborative work. Nathan, however, felt a tightening in his chest. Returning to Chicago meant facing his past. "We need to think this through calmly," he replied diplomatically. "Could we schedule a meeting to discuss the details?" "Of course," Sophia handed him her card. "But don't take too long. I have other artists interested in the space." As she walked away, a familiar voice froze Nathan. "I always knew you had a talent for art, Nate." Patricia Miller, his ex-girlfriend from college, stood before him. Elegant as ever, she exuded the sophistication of the world he had left behind. "Patricia, what are you doing in Asheville?" "I'm here representing some investors interested in regional art," she replied, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on Lily Anderson, who was assisting other clients. "So, this is the famous artisan who stole your heart." The condescending tone in her voice didn't go unnoticed. Nathan straightened his posture, proud. "Lily is a talented artist and my wife. Our collaborative work has been incredibly rewarding." "Rewarding?" Patricia chuckled softly. "Nathan, you were the heir to an empire. Now you're here, selling pottery at a local fair. Don't you feel like you're wasting your potential?" "On the contrary," he replied, picking up one of the latest pieces they had created. For the first time, I'm truly realizing my potential. Creating something real, something that touches people. Lily approached, sensing the tension in the air. Nathan introduced her, and Patricia maintained a polite but distant smile. You know, Nathan, Patricia continued, your father isn't doing well. The company is facing some issues in Asia, and he misses your leadership. You were always the best strategist on the team. My father has competent executives, Nathan replied, holding Lily close. I'm sure they'll find a solution. Don't be naive, Patricia lowered her voice. Do you really think this simple life will satisfy you forever? One day you'll wake up and realize all the potential you've thrown away. That's enough, Lily interjected, her voice firm but controlled. Nathan hasn't thrown anything away. He chose to be happy. He chose to create instead of just managing. If you can't see the value in that, that's your problem. Patricia took a step back, surprised by the direct response. Well, the invitation stands. When you tire of this bucolic adventure, you know where to find us. After she left, Lily held her husband's hand. Are you okay? Better than ever, he replied, kissing her forehead. Patricia made me see clearly how much I've grown. The old Nathan would have been shaken by that speech about wasted potential. Today I know my true potential is here, creating something meaningful by your side. Chapter 7. A week after the fair, the couple's success was the talk of Asheville. The orders multiplied, and the small workshop could barely keep up with the demand. Joseph hired 2 assistants to help with basic production, allowing Nathan to focus on the more elaborate pieces. One quiet morning, as Lily Anderson was putting the finishing touches on a set of painted plates, an imported car parked in front of the workshop. A man in a suit stepped out of the vehicle, carrying a leather briefcase. Good morning, he said, introducing himself. I'm Richard Miller, the attorney for Mr. William Thompson. I'd like to speak with the owner. Joseph, who was working on a piece near the entrance, wiped his hands on his apron. That would be me. How can I help you? I have a purchase proposal for your establishment, the lawyer announced, opening the briefcase. Mr. William Thompson is interested in investing in regional craftsmanship and believes your workshop has great potential. Lily and Nathan exchanged worried glances. It was clear that William was trying to interfere in their lives in a new way. The offer is quite generous, Richard continued, sliding a document onto the work table. Well above market value. Joseph picked up the paper, his eyes calmly scanning the numbers. A faint smile appeared on his lips. Interesting. And what would Mr. Thompson's plan be for the workshop? Complete modernization. We would transform this into a high-end ceramic factory with large-scale production. You could, of course, continue as a consultant. And my employees, my daughter and son-in-law? The lawyer hesitated for a moment. Well, naturally, there would be a restructuring, but everyone would receive adequate compensation. Nathan took a step forward, but Lily stopped him with a gentle touch. Joseph carefully folded the document and handed it back to the lawyer. Mr. Richard, please tell your client that I appreciate the interest, but this studio is not for sale, not for any amount. Mr. Joseph, be reasonable, insisted the lawyer. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Think about the future, the security of your family. That's exactly what I'm thinking about, replied Joseph, returning to his potter's wheel. My family isn't just numbers on a piece of paper. This studio is our history, our art, our life. After the lawyer left, a thoughtful silence filled the room. It was Lily who broke it, approaching her father with teary eyes. Dad, the amount he offered, it was a lot of money. Money isn't everything, my dear. Your grandfather taught me that true wealth lies in what we create with love, in what we pass on to the next generations. This studio is more than a business. It's our legacy. Nathan watched the scene with a mix of admiration and guilt. I'm sorry, my father is doing this because of me. Don't blame yourself, son. Joseph placed a hand on his shoulder. Your father is just doing what he thinks is right in his own way. One day he'll understand, just like my father-in-law did. That afternoon, as they worked, Lily began to hum softly, as she often did when she was particularly focused on a painting. Her strokes were even more precise, as if each brushstroke carried the emotion of the moment they had lived. This series will be called Roots, she announced, showing the pattern she was creating. Flowers and branches that seemed to sprout from the ceramic itself, intertwining in organic and lively shapes. It's beautiful, murmured Nathan, admiring his wife's work. "You've managed to capture exactly what your father said about legacy." Lily smiled, continuing her painting. "Every piece we make tells a story, love. The story of its transformation, of my father's courage, of the love that brought us here." At the end of the day, as they put away their tools, Joseph called the couple for a conversation. "Today's visit made me think, it's time for you to have your own space." "What do you mean, Dad?" "That abandoned warehouse on Market Street. I bought it years ago, thinking of expanding the business. I think now I've found the right purpose for it." Nathan and Lily exchanged glances, surprised. The warehouse was a spacious, well-located space that could be transformed into a wonderful studio. "But Dad, we can't accept—" "You can and you will," Joseph interrupted. "You've built something special together. You deserve your own space to grow. Besides," he smiled, "it's more than time for me to start thinking about retirement." Chapter 8. The renovation of the warehouse began immediately. The community of Asheville, moved by the couple's story, came together to help. Masons offered their services at a discount, neighbors showed up with tools and materials, and even the mayor facilitated the necessary permits. While overseeing the construction, Nathan and Lily continued working in Joseph's studio, now with renewed energy. The Roots series was nearly complete, and photos of the pieces shared on social media were attracting more and more attention. "Look at this," Lily showed her phone to Nathan during a break. It was a message from Sophia Williams, the gallery owner from Chicago. She saw the photos of the new series and wants to schedule a meeting. Nathan hugged his wife from behind, looking at the images. "Your paintings are getting more and more impressive. How do you manage to capture so much emotion in every stroke?" "I learned from you," she replied, turning to face him. "When you work on the wheel, every movement you make conveys feeling. I just try to do the same with my brushes." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mrs. Clare, who was carrying an old box in her arms. "I found this in the attic," she said, placing the box on a table. "I think it's time to pass it on." Inside the box were dozens of letters, all handwritten, some already yellowed with age. "These are the letters I wrote to your father when we were young," Mrs. Clare explained. "In the early years, when everything was difficult, I wrote to keep hope alive." Lily carefully picked up one of the letters. Her mother's delicate handwriting told stories of love, perseverance, and shared dreams. On some pages, small drawings adorned the margins, flowers, birds, patterns that Lily now recognized in her own work. "Mum, I didn't know you used to draw." "They were just little doodles to cheer up your father," Mrs. Clare smiled. "But I think that talent blossomed much more beautifully in you, my dear." Nathan watched the scene in silence, thinking of his own mother. Elizabeth had called the night before, saying that his father had been acting differently, more introspective. The failed attempt to buy the studio seemed to have affected him in an unexpected way. "I'll make some tea," Mrs. Clare announced, leaving mother and daughter alone with the letters. Lily began to read aloud. "Dear Joseph, today the sun rose differently in Asheville. Perhaps because yesterday you finally managed to make that perfect vase you had always dreamed of. Or maybe because your smile lit up the entire studio. Sometimes I think about how your family was against our love, how they said you were throwing your future away. But when I see your hands creating beauty from clay, I know you found your true calling." Nathan felt his eyes well up. The words from his mother-in-law so many years ago echoed his own story, as if time were a perfect circle that always returned to the same point. "There's more," Lily continued reading. "Today I made some drawings for you. They're nothing compared to your ceramics, but I poured all my love into them. Who knows, maybe one day we'll have a son or daughter who inherits your talent for art." Lily paused, moved. "Mom always knew." "Knew what?" "That art was in our blood. In the letters, she always talks about how Dad's work was special, because it came from the heart. It's exactly how we feel when we create together." Nathan picked up one of the most recent letters from the box. The date showed it had been written shortly after he arrived in Asheville. "Dear Joseph," he read aloud, "today I saw our daughter looking at your new apprentice with the same sparkle in her eyes that I had when I met you. History repeats itself, my love, but now we are the parents who must trust in the power of true love." The couple spent the rest of the afternoon reading the letters, discovering their own story through Claire's words. Each letter was a testament that the path they had chosen, though difficult, was the right one. Chapter 9. The The opening of the new studio coincided with the first exhibition of the Roots series at Sophia Williams Gallery in Chicago. The space, once an abandoned warehouse, had been transformed into a warm and luminous environment, with large windows that let in natural light and allowed visitors to observe the creative process of the pieces. "It's even more beautiful than I imagined," said Mr. Joseph, walking through the renovated space. The light walls highlighted the displayed pieces, and a mezzanine had been built to house Lily's painting area. The exhibition in Chicago would be the next day, and several pieces had already been carefully packed for transport. Lily was organizing the final details when Elizabeth, Nathan's mother, unexpectedly appeared at the studio. "Mrs. Elizabeth!" Lily ran to hug her mother-in-law. "What a wonderful surprise!" Elizabeth seemed nervous, her eyes scanning the room with admiration and concern. "The studio looks beautiful, dears, but I need to talk to you. It's about your father, Nathan." Nathan put down the piece he was working on and approached. His mother seemed more downcast than usual, her hands trembling slightly as she held her designer bag. "The business isn't doing well," she began, sitting in a chair Lily offered. "The expansion in Asia, there have been serious problems. Your father is facing the worst crisis the company has ever seen." "What do you mean?" asked Nathan, feeling a tightness in his chest. Despite everything, he still worried about his father. "He's been staying up all night trying to find solutions. The investors are nervous. Some contracts have been cancelled." Elizabeth hesitated. "Yesterday, for the first time in 40 years, I saw your father cry." Lily held her husband's hand, sensing his tension. Nathan ran his hand through his hair, a gesture he always made when he was worried. "He doesn't want my help, Mom. He made that very clear when he disinherited me. Son, your father is a proud man, you know that. But in the last few weeks, something has changed. He's been spending hours looking at photos of your work online. Yesterday, I found one of the catalogs from the Asheville Fair on his table." Joseph, who had been listening quietly, stepped closer. "Sometimes, we need to lose something to understand its true value." Elizabeth looked at her son's father-in-law with gratitude. "Tomorrow is the opening of the exhibition in Chicago, isn't it? Your father knows, he won't admit it. But I know he's been following every step you've taken." Lily had a sudden idea. "Mrs. Elizabeth, why don't you come with us tomorrow? You could bring Mr. William. Even if he doesn't want to talk to us, at least he could see our work in person." Nathan stared at his wife, surprised by the suggestion. Elizabeth seemed hesitant. "I don't know if he'd agree." "You don't have to say it was us who invited you," Lily suggested. "Just tell him there's an interesting exhibition of artistic ceramics, something related to the investments he's been researching." Joseph smiled, proud of his daughter's cleverness. The best reconciliations start with small steps. That night, after Elizabeth left with the promise to try to bring William to the exhibition, Nathan couldn't sleep. He stayed in the studio late, working on a special piece. "What are you doing?" Lily asked, finding him focused on his work. "Remember the first vase I tried to make when I got here? It was a complete disaster," he smiled. "But my father always said I was persistent since I was a child. When something went wrong, I would try again and again until I got it right." Lily watched her husband's hands confidently shaping the clay, creating forms that a year ago would have been impossible for him. "Is this piece for him?" "It's my story, our story," Nathan explained, pointing out the details of the vase taking shape. "I'll leave a special space for you to paint too. I want him to see not just what we've created, but who we've become." Lily kissed her husband's forehead, lightly smudging it with paint from her own hands. "He'll see it, love. Sometimes people need to lose their footing to find a new path." The special vase was worked on throughout the night. When the sun rose, it was ready to be fired, a unique piece that represented Nathan's journey of transformation, from the businessman who gave up everything for love to the artist he had become. Chapter 10. Sophia Williams's gallery was an elegant space in the heart of the Upper East Side in Chicago. The pieces from the Roots series were arranged to tell a story, starting with the simplest works and building up to the most complex and emotional creations. Nathan and Lily arrived early for the final adjustments. The special piece they had created overnight occupied a prominent place at the center of the exhibition. Lily had painted a tree on it, its branches transforming into different scenes from their lives. Mr. Joseph's workshop, the paper flowers, the garden wedding, all interconnected in a continuous flow of colors and shapes. "It's perfect," said Sophia, admiring the setup. "I have several important collectors confirmed for today. You've created something unique, a true fusion of tradition and innovation. The hours flew by, and soon the first guests began to arrive. Art critics, collectors, journalists all admired the pieces and asked questions about the couple's creative process. "How do you achieve such a perfect integration between ceramics and painting?" asked a respected critic. "It's a dance," replied Lily Anderson. "Nathan creates the forms thinking about the spaces I'm going to paint, and I paint thinking about how to highlight every curve he shaped." In the middle of the afternoon, Elizabeth Thompson arrived. She was alone. Nathan's heart tightened, but his mother quickly approached. "He's coming," she whispered. "He's parking the car. Nathan, son. He's different. Please give him a chance." Minutes later, William Thompson entered the gallery. He was thinner than Nathan remembered, and his hair had more grey strands. He wore an impeccable suit as always, but there was something different in his posture, a vulnerability his son had never seen before. William stopped in front of the first piece, observing it carefully. He moved slowly through the exhibition, studying each work without saying a word. Nathan and Lily kept their distance, allowing him to absorb everything at his own pace. When he reached the centerpiece, William stood still. His eyes traced every detail of Lily's painting, every curve shaped by Nathan. A single tear rolled down his face. "He was always talented with his hands," he said softly to Elizabeth, who was by his side. "When he was little, he would spend hours putting together puzzles, building things." Nathan felt Lily squeeze his hand, encouraging him. Slowly, he approached his father. "This piece was made last night," he said gently. "It's our story." William didn't turn around, continuing to observe the vase. "You were always stubborn." Her voice was hoarse. "Once you decided something, there was no way to change your mind. I learned from you, father." "No," William finally turned to face his son. "You learned to be better than me. I let pride destroy our family. You had the courage to follow your heart." Lily stepped closer, standing by her husband's side. William looked at her with different eyes, far from the initial disdain. "Mr. William," she began, "every piece here tells a story of love. Of Nathan's love for art, of my love for painting, of our love for each other. And there's room for more stories." "I failed," William said, surprising everyone with his honesty. "Not just as a father, but as a businessman. I thought success was measured only by numbers, but looking at what you've built here, this is a true legacy." "Father," Nathan stepped forward, "it's never too late to start over. You taught me that too, you know. All those times you made me try again when I failed at something." Elizabeth approached her husband, holding his hand. William looked again at the central vase, at the tree that connected all the scenes. "Son, is there still room for one more branch on this tree?" Chapter 11. In the months following the exhibition, the transformation in the family's life was extraordinary. William began visiting the studio regularly, first just observing the work of his son and daughter-in-law, then asking questions about the creative process. During one of these visits, he surprised everyone by asking to try working with the clay. "My hands aren't as skilled as yours," he said, sitting awkwardly at the potter's wheel. Nathan positioned himself behind his father, guiding his movements, just as Joseph had done with him in the beginning. "It's like in the company, Dad," Nathan explained. "You need to find the right balance between strength and delicacy." William focused intensely, his hands calloused from years of signing documents, now trying to shape the clay. The piece came out crooked and uneven, but his eyes shone with a satisfaction Nathan had never seen before. "You know," William said, looking at his imperfect creation, "I've spent my whole life building things I couldn't touch. Numbers on paper, stocks in markets, contracts in drawers. This is real." Lily, who was painting in the loft, carefully descended the stairs, one hand resting lightly on her still barely noticeable belly. She and Nathan had discovered the pregnancy the week before, but were waiting for the right moment to share the news with the family. "The secret is to let your heart guide your hands," she said, approaching. "Every piece carries a bit of the soul of its creator." Elizabeth, who had started spending more time in Asheville with her husband, entered the studio carrying a tray of coffee. She paused at the door, moved by the scene. Her husband, always so formal and distant, with his hands dirty from clay, trying to create something with their son. "I had to lose everything to find what truly matters," William reflected, standing up from the wheel. "The company, Maybe it's time to rethink everything. What do you mean, Dad? I've been thinking, what if we transform the company? Instead of just building properties and making deals, we could create a foundation to support traditional artists, preserve ancient techniques, give opportunities to young talents. Nathan looked at his father in surprise. Are you serious? I've never been more serious in my entire life. William wiped his hands on a cloth. Joseph showed me that there's wealth that can't be measured in money. And you, son, you taught me that sometimes we need to lose our way to find the right path. Lily felt it was the perfect moment. Well, since we're talking about new paths, she took Nathan's hand, seeking support. I think it's time to tell them, love. Nathan smiled, understanding the cue. Dad, Mom, you're going to be grandparents. The silence that followed was broken by the sound of the cup Elizabeth almost dropped. William froze for a moment, his teary eyes fixed on the couple. A grandchild? His voice came out choked. I'm going to be a grandfather? Or grandmother, Lily added, smiling. It's still too early to know. Elizabeth rushed to hug her daughter-in-law, while William remained motionless, processing the news. Finally, he took a step forward and, to everyone's surprise, hugged his son tightly. Forgive me, he whispered, for all the time we lost, for all the pain I caused. There's nothing to forgive, Dad, Nathan replied, returning the hug. What matters is what we build from here on out. Mr. Joseph and Mrs. Clare, who had just arrived at the studio, watched the scene from the doorway. The old ceramist smiled, remembering when he received the news that he would be a grandfather to Lily. Life is like clay, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Sometimes we need to knead it and start over to create something truly special. Chapter 12. The opening of the new ceramics shop coincided with Lily's birthday and the celebration of her 6 months of pregnancy. The space, much larger than the original studio, had been renovated with funds from the newly established Thompson Foundation for Traditional Arts, the first project of William's new phase of the company. The place maintained its artisanal essence, with large windows that allowed visitors to observe the creative process of the pieces. In the center of the main hall, a special piece caught everyone's attention: the vase that Nathan and Lily had created for the exhibition in Chicago, now with a new branch painted on the tree, representing the baby on the way. Everything is perfect, said Sophia Williams, who was now a frequent partner in the couple's projects. You've turned artisanal ceramics into contemporary art, without losing tradition. The opening party brought together people from every chapter of the family's history. Carmen Garcia, who had discovered the couple's talent, was chatting animatedly with art collectors. Mr. Joseph and William, now unlikely friends, discussed plans for an apprentice program at the studio. Who would have thought, commented Mrs. Clare to Elizabeth, watching their husbands, that one day we'd see these two talking about art and tradition. Elizabeth smiled, adjusting a paper flower arrangement that Lily had made especially for the occasion. Love has the power to transform people. Just look at my William. I've never seen him so happy. Lily, her belly now visible under a floral dress, greeted guests alongside Nathan. Her face glowed with that special light that only pregnancy brings. In her hands, always a brush, as even during the party she couldn't resist making small touches to the displayed pieces. I have a gift for you, announced William, gathering the family during a quieter moment of the celebration. He handed an envelope to Nathan. Inside were documents from the company and the foundation. Son, I want you and Lily to be the directors of the Traditional Crafts Preservation Program. You've understood something it took me a lifetime to learn. The true value lies in creating beauty and meaning, not just wealth. Nathan looked at the papers, moved. Dad, we don't need to. Yes, we do, William interrupted. It's not just about money or status. It's about building a true legacy, something your son or daughter can be proud of in the future. Joseph raised a glass. A toast, then. To family, to art, and to new beginnings. Everyone raised their glasses except Lily, who lifted a juice glass, laughing. At that moment, the baby moved in her belly, as if wanting to join the celebration. He's already an artist, she joked, guiding Nathan's hand to feel the movements. He or she will have the best of both worlds, said Elizabeth. Your artistic sensitivity and the determination of the Thompsons. By the end of the night, when most of the guests had left, Nathan found his father alone in the studio, gazing at a shelf with his first pieces, imperfect works he kept to remember his journey. "You know, son," William said without turning, "I always wanted you to be better than me. And you are, just in a way I never imagined." Nathan placed a hand on his father's shoulder. "We both found our way, Dad. We just needed time to realize that sometimes the best path isn't the most obvious one." Lily joined them, carrying the special vase that marked their story. Gently, she began painting a new branch on the tree. "What are you adding?" Nathan asked. "The future," she replied, her eyes shining. "Because our story is just beginning." And there, in that studio that had witnessed so many transformations, 3 generations came together around art and love, proving that the strongest bonds are those woven with courage, forgiveness, and the willingness to start anew.